Good. So what better way to start our Gemara session this morning, but with a digression. We're at 14A3. 14A3, the very top of the page. The topic is that we were talking about the prophets of Israel. Of course, Purim itself was created with prophetic inspiration to know that we could add another holiday. And then we got into this whole side thing of how many prophets are there, who qualifies as a prophet, and if there were more prophets, why do we say there were only 48 male prophets and 7 female prophets? What about the thousands and thousands of prophets all through history? And the answer is we're talking about these are the prophets that had some kind of permanent impact on Jewish life. We already started back on 14A2 with the verse that the father of Shmuel, of Samuel, was named Elkanah, and he lived in Ramatayim Tzofim. And we said that Ramatayim Tzofim means that there were zillions, Matayim, there were 200 prophets just in that one place, in that one generation. So there were zillions and zillions of prophets. So then, like I said, the Gemara says, well, but we're only talking about the major leagues. We're not talking about all of the other, minor league prophets. So now we're still looking at that one verse of Ramatayim Tzofim, and that's where we are, 14A3. Okay, and somebody needs to help us by reading this text.
Fine.
Thank you.
I'm here. I stand ready.
Yay.
The Gemara now digresses. Surprise, surprise. That was an editorial comment. Don't write it down. To offer other interpretations.
It's an editorial comment to an editorial comment.
Yeah, that's true.
Right? This is not Gemara text. This is just the editor saying. Go ahead.
So the Gemara now digresses to offer other interpretations of 1 Samuel 1:1 cited above. Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani said that Ramatayim Tzofim can be understood to mean a man who came from 2 mounts that watch, that is, face each other.
Right. So Ramatayim is like Ramot, and that means high places, 2 big hills, and Tzofim is to look at, right? Look out toward. Right, we have it in Hatikva, right? Right, as long as the Jew still looks out toward the east, still constantly pays attention to the fact that they really, need to go back to the east, to the Orient where they come from. So that's part of the Hatikva. So and that's Har Hatzofim, Mount Scopus. It's Har Hatzofim, and that's the word scopus, right? To see, to look at.
Okay.
Okay. So he came from so this is an interpretation simply saying this is that the geography, the topography of the place that he lived at, where that there were 2 kind of like big promontories that were facing each other. Another
interpretation. Rabbi Chanin said that it means a man who descended from people who stand at the height of the world. And who are they? The sons of Korach. As it is written, and the sons of Korach did not die. It was also taught in the name of our teacher, Rabbi, a place was set up high for them in Gehinnom, and they stood on it.
Okay, so this is a different interpretation. It's not about topography and geography. It's not about land masses and the high land and not, but we'll see it actually ends up having that as well. But it's a metaphor. It's about, people who have, stood head and shoulders above other people, right? People who have been exemplary and are, and are high up in everybody's esteem. So that's this word Ramatayim, like truma, to lift up. These are people who are lifted up above all others. So specifically, who is being singled out here? The sons of Korach. What's so special about the sons of Korach? Well, who's Korach?
He was
Anybody remember who he was? What happened?
he was
with
a
him? What his
rebel
story?
against the authority of Moses and Aaron.
Right. He's Moses' cousin, and he does a power grab against Moses and Aaron. Right. Moses and Aaron are brothers. They're both his cousins. And he says, you guys are being too, you're too powerful, and really you shouldn't have the power. And his agenda in the end, the way the rabbis understood it, was that he wanted to take the power.
No.
He was a demagogue. He was a populist demagogue. So he leads this rebellion. And what happens to him?
He and some people are swallowed up by the earth.
Right. He has like 250 followers, supposedly, and they all get the earth opens up. It's like a sinkhole phenomenon, and they get swallowed up by the earth. But the Torah tells us later on, Uvenei Korach lo metu. The sons of Korach did not die. So how can that be? So the Torah itself doesn't tell us. The Torah just gives us that information. And then we have subsequent traditions. So for instance, there are a number of Psalms in the book of Psalms that are attributed to the children of Korach.
Livnei Korach, yeah.
Right? So for instance, Monday's Psalm of the day, Lam Natzech Livnei Korach Mizmor. Right, that this is a psalm that comes from the children of Korach, right? So they continued functioning and actually contributing, creating psalms, creating prayers for the temple worship as Levites. They were Levites, just like Moses was, so they were still part of the ongoing tradition. So that's what the imagination of the Jewish people formed into Midrash, was inspired by. These children of Korach had the understanding not to follow what their father's agenda was. And look at, it's so tempting and it's so common for that. And of course, and we even bank on that, right? How do we want to continue our traditions? Like we said, we had a little discussion about the Shema before. Teach your children, let your children be taught by you. You'll carry on the traditions of your children, of your parents, and then you'll be, God give it to the next generation, from one generation to the next. And we hope that the generations will have an influence on the younger folks to continue to perpetuate the traditions. So now here we have a tough situation. What happens when the tradition that you're being given by your parent is bad, right? What if the lessons that you're getting from your parent are destructive? So how many lives have been deformed or really hurt in many, many ways because of that powerful relationship between a parent and a child, when it doesn't work for the good. So that power that a parent has over a child is huge. And in this particular case, as far as the Torah is concerned, Korach was a bad guy. So how do you extricate yourself from the influence of a bad guy? There's like a whole literature of people who run away from the mafia. Right, and not just run away from that, but they're because the mafia is a family, la familia. How do you extricate yourself from your family? You love your family. You're connected to your family. You should be connected to your family and love your family. So how do you do that when you're horrified by what the family actually stands for? It's an excruciating challenge. Nobody should have to be in that kind of situation. So Bnei Korach, the children of Korach, are understood to be these really exceptional human beings who were able to, withstand. And there's that word standing. They stand above and beyond what happened to their, what they were taught and what they were tempted to do. I wanna point out something that's of interest, I think, and ironic. How are they called? What's the title of this? And I would say it's probably more than one generation, right? It's a whole group of people. They're called B'nai Korach. Isn't that, David? They're called the children of Korach. Isn't that something? They're rebelling against their father. They're completely distancing themselves from their father's lesson, from their father's project, but they have their father's name all the time. In a certain sense, they're redeeming their father, right? They're saying, we are Korach's children, and whatever was good in Korach, that's what we're keeping on going with. And he was a Levite, and we will be the best Levites we can possibly be. And you can call us the children of Korach, right? So instead of erasing his name, just like he himself was swallowed up, his name actually then gets attached to these exemplary people. So, there's a little kind of, what can I say? A little gentle kind of redemption there. Let's look at 29 for an additional imaginative reconstruction of what was going on, the Midrash.
Note 29, this is Rashi commenting on Psalm 42:1, explains that Korach's sons initially joined their father's infamous mutiny against Moses and Aaron. In the midst of the rebellion, however, they realized their folly and repented. When the earth opened its mouth to swallow the entire assembly of Korach and to transport them to Gehinnom, God miraculously provided a place of refuge for Korach's three sons. They landed on an elevated niche within the earth and were saved from death.
Right. This is just like one of those thriller movies, where everybody goes over the cliff, but the good guys somehow, there's this little extra piece of rock
lands or holds on
that they land on some ledge while everybody else falls into the abyss, into the Gehinnom, right, into hell, into the valley of Hinnom, and they get saved. But here we have a midrash that Rashi is quoting that sort of speaks to that ambivalence, right, to that struggle back and forth. The original idea of, we follow Dad, right? We follow what Pops is teaching. And wait a second, something is wrong here, etc. So that's the idea then, that we give the topography image back into this midrash, and Ramatayim, the hills, the mountains, from the first interpretation now come in to play a role to save these exemplary high quality people. Okay, good.
The Gemara stated previously that 7 prophetesses prophesied to Israel.
Say that 10 times fast.
I'm sorry?
Nothing. I said,
sorry,
say that 10 times. Say that. Say that. I can't even say that.
Say that sentence 3 times fast.
Right.
Yeah, not going to happen. Anyway, there were 7 prophetesses who prophesied to Israel. The Gemara now enumerates them. Who were these 7 prophetesses? Sarah, Miriam, Deborah, Hannah, Abigail, Huldah, and Esther. The Gemara cites scripture to establish the credentials of each. Sarah was a prophetess, as it is written, the father of Milcah and the father of Yiscah.
Obviously, that proves it. QED.
QED.
Right.
Couldn't be more straightforward.
So then now we need a little extra help.
Commenting on this verse, Rabbi Yitzchak said, Yiscah is Sarah. And why is she called Yiscah? Because she saw with holy inspiration. As it is written, all that Sarah tells you, heed her voice. Another interpretation, she is called Yiscah because everyone gazed at her beauty.
Okay. So the word Yiscah has a relationship to the word to vision and to see. So the what we have is that the Torah says early on, when they first introduce Abraham and Nahor and so on, that there's this woman named Yiscah who we never heard of before. So the tradition says Yiscah is Sarah, right? Yiscah and Sarah are the same person, but Yiscah means the visionary, the one who sees. So And then we have, I think, a slightly more cogent point, which is God is on her side, right? When Sarah has her challenge to Abraham, and Abraham is not happy with what Sarah is demanding, God comes out and says, no, she's right. You listen to her. You listen to her. So there is this, divine confirmation that what she is saying is the real deal. So Sarah is the prophet. Okay, so that's one. And then we have the other idea that she was very beautiful. And of course, that plays into the whole biblical story about when Abraham and Sarah go down to Egypt, and Abraham says, uh-oh, you're very beautiful. What are we going to do about this? I'm going to get in a lot of trouble. So that's, of course, the notorious story about that. But so she's known as a person, what we would say in a looker, right? Yiska means what a looker, right? Okay.
A proof that Miriam was a prophetess. Miriam was also a prophetess, as it is written, and Miriam the prophetess, the sister. This is pretty straightforward.
That's not a bad proof, right? That's pretty good.
The sister of Aaron took. So there we have it. The Gemara asks, why was she not the sister of Moses as well? Why does the Torah refer to her exclusively as the sister of Aaron?
Okay, so this verse that talks about her as being a prophet and the sister of Aaron, that verse, what's the context of that verse? Does anybody remember?
I do not.
David. I thought you raised your hand.
It's at the parting of the Red Sea.
Right.
It's the
Yeah.
So they go through and the men celebrate and the women, and Miriam leads in song.
Right. It's the Shirat Hayam song at the Red Sea, and first we have the whole entire song at the Red Sea written out, and then it says Az Yashir Moshe Uvnei Israel. Then Moses and the children of Israel all sang this song, and then we have the whole song, and then after that it says Vatikach Miriam Hanaviyah Achot Aharon. So she took the timbrels, the cymbals in her hands, and she led all of the women. And then we have a short, little quote from the song. It's the custom of many people, including me, that is when we recite the song at the Red Sea in our daily prayers, we include that as part of the text. Because and when for instance, when we stand up to listen to the song at the Red Sea, we stand up through that part of the text. The song at the Red Sea is not over until we get Miriam and the women to finish singing the song at the Red Sea also.
And I think it also gets the special trup when it's laned, if I remember.
If you pay attention to it, yes, right. So so that's where she is called explicitly a prophet, and she's also identified as the daughter of Aaron, the sister of Aaron. And now the Gemara is going to say, well, what? But she's also Moses' sister. So why is that? The simple answer that the Gemara doesn't give is that Moses already got mentioned as leading the song at the Red Sea. Now Miriam is getting mentioned as leading the song at the Red Sea. So let us not forget Aaron, right? So Aaron is mentioned here because Aaron is also one of the big three, right? One of the three leaders of the Jewish people who kept them going until finally the Exodus was able to happen. And then, of course, Aaron, if it's not for Aaron, Moses wouldn't have agreed to lead the children of Israel, because that's what that was the deal maker at the end when God says, okay, you won't do it alone. Aaron will be with you the whole way. And then Moses says, okay. So in order to get Aaron mentioned at this crucial moment, so he's mentioned in this kind of way. Okay, that's a simple way of explaining why he is mentioned in that verse. But now the Gemara is going to give us another important midrash. The Gemara answers, No, you're on mute.
The Gemara answers, Rav Nachman said in the name of Rav, because she prophesied when she was the sister of just Aaron, before Moses was born, saying, in the future, my mother will bear a son who will save Israel. When Moses was born, the entire house filled with light.
Okay, so we'll get to Moses in a second. Let's get to this first point that they're saying. We're saying Miriam was a prophetess. So, of course, we don't have explicitly in the Torah itself a record of her prophesying. We have a record of her leading the women in song at the Red Sea, and that is a certain kind of prophecy. That was prophecy in and of itself, because that was spontaneous, and it was saying words that became sanctified as part of the Torah, without being commanded to do so. So they were channeling a divine spirit. But in that sense, all of the women together, were suffused and imbued with the divine spirit. The rabbis say that every single person, even the lowliest maidservant, was a greater prophet at the Red Sea than even Jeremiah. That because they saw God splitting the Red Sea. What better prophetic experience could you have? So but she's called a prophetess, and we don't have any records of her, teaching the children of Israel anything. Later on we have other, we have a little bit of a problem with her actually, not being happy with her brother Moses. That's at the end of her life. But here we're at the beginning, and she's called a prophet for what? So the Gemara, I think, very astutely understands she's a prophet before we got to this Exodus business, right? And this, of course, is part of the deeper thinking that how did we actually survive all of that bondage? How did we survive as a people, through all of the generations of being slaves in Egypt? What was the glue that kept us together? And you need leadership. You need people who are going to keep the community somehow aware of their own special qualities, so that they don't not just give up hope, but they don't disappear into whatever else is going on. So many other peoples. That's what happens. So the understanding that the rabbis have, which I think is just plain realism, is that there were always, before we get to Moses, and of course that's also one of the great questions, how come all of a sudden Moses is so, what's the context? What's the world that Moses enters? What's this, we have 70 elders are mentioned. Well, it says elders, I don't think it says 70. Elders are mentioned. There are people that have been holding the Hebrew community together all this time, and in the most difficult circumstances, right? People are slaves, they're dying, the children are being slaughtered. So the work that was done, the unsung, to use this Song of the Red Sea image, the unsung leadership of the generations before Moses that kept some survival going until Moses could finally get, the divine charge and be able to go in there and get us out. That was so necessary. That had to happen. And even though we don't have celebrations of it and so on, and that means there's a pre-Mosaic history of leadership and inspiration in the Jewish people. And Miriam and Aaron are older than Moses. So when God says to Moses, Aaron, your brother, is going to come out and be your helper, it's not simply that two is better than one. Aaron has been in the trenches already. Aaron has been doing the kinds of, almost hopeless work with hope and faith. And now Miriam is getting that same credit. And that's why she's called Aaron's sister. There was no Moses. There was just Aaron and her doing what they could do. And of course, we have the beautiful, beautiful stories of her watching over her brother and making sure that her brother survives. And now the Midrash makes that story expand backwards, and she's given credit as being the prophet to make sure that there will be a Moses. Okay, so let's just read it one more time. Because she prophesied.
Because she prophesied when she was the sister of just Aaron, before Moses was born, saying, "In the future, my mother will bear a son who will save Israel."
So that's a truncated mention of the Midrash. There are other places where the Midrash is expanded. So it wasn't simply that she foretold that her mother would give birth to a savior, right? There are other Midrashim which even go deeper. What's the job of a prophet? Is the job of a prophet to tell the future? That's not the main job of a prophet, not in the Hebrew prophets. The main job of a prophet is to tell truth to power, is to keep us aware of what we really need to be doing, how we should be behaving, how we should be serving God and each other, how we should be taking care of each other, right? So this other Midrash imagines, so again, I think so profoundly, accurately, and beautifully, that Miriam sees that her parents, Amram and Yocheved, they have two children, Aaron and she. They stop trying to have kids. Why did they stop trying to have kids? Because Pharaoh says any kids that are born are going to get killed. So Miriam harangues her parents. Talk about parents and children again, like the children of Korach. She says to her parents, "What are you doing? How can you not try to have another child?" And they say, because Pharaoh said that if we have a male child, they're going to throw the child into the river, kill them. So according to the Midrash, Miriam says, "You're worse than Pharaoh, because Pharaoh is only making a decree against the male babies, and you're preventing even female babies from being born. So what right do you have to do that?" So that's a kind of a real prophetic voice of telling the parents, this is what's right. You're supposed to know better than me. You're the people of authority. Well, you're not doing the right thing. So the Midrash gives Miriam the credit for restoring the faith that Amram and Yocheved, her parents, had. And then, miraculously, of course, it's Moses who was born, and Moses who then, becomes Moses. Okay, so go ahead.
When Moses was born, the entire house filled with light. Whereupon her father rose and kissed her on the head and said to her, "My daughter, your prophecy has been fulfilled."
Okay, so happy ending. Great. So we have this wonderful, shining new baby in the house. But of course, we know that the story is more complicated. So here we go.
However, when pursuant to Pharaoh's decree, they cast Moses into the river, her father rose and struck her on her head and said to her, "My daughter, where is your prophecy?" Therefore it is written, "And his sister stood herself at a distance to know," which is interpreted to mean to know what will be with the end of her prophecy. That is, if Moses will survive his ordeal and eventually save Israel, as she predicted.
Okay, so this has this little, simple fairy tale kind of quality, but it's really, I think, quite sensitive to the emotional world of people living in that kind of situation, right? We have here a little bit of child abuse.
Mhm.
The parent hits the child. So we can just go tisk, tisk, tisk. That's not nice. But what we should really be, I think, reading is the anguish that this situation has caused. right? On the one hand, we get this momentary sense of, oh, redemption, light, miracle, it's unbelievable. But then the brute reality comes in, and there's Pharaoh, and he's murdering the babies right and left, and they're going to have to give up their child. And until anybody is in that situation, no one should judge a parent who is now saying, has to do that. And he takes it out on his daughter. And that's a tragedy. It's terrible. But it comes out of such terrible pain. And then we have Miriam herself going, what is going on here? And that's how they read that later part of the story. When she is watching out over her brother, it says lidayah, which is a little strange in the Hebrew, right? She wants to know if that knowing that she had before, was it right or was she wrong? Was this just like wishful thinking, or was this some kind of will it really be okay? Can we get through this? So she doesn't know. Maybe she caused her parents irreparable pain. Maybe she caused her parents to have this terrible, that, if she hadn't opened her mouth, there wouldn't be this loss. That's what she needs to know now. She needs to know that dedication that she had to a dream, that it was better to have more life. Was that, a fantasy? Was that naive? And was that a hurtful kind of naive vision? Or was it something that was going to, to last? And of course, that's, she has to intervene, and she has to make sure that it does work, right? With the help, of course, of Pharaoh's daughter. I was reading Dara Horn wrote a book just recently, The World Loves Dead Jews. She writes about how we love to quote Anne Frank's words. I still believe that people are good. I still believe that they will be good. And then she comments, we love to quote that part of it. And, but the point is, 3 weeks later, people were not good. And they snitched on her, and they the people that didn't murder her were accomplices in murdering her. And then the Nazis came in and murdered her. So where's the good people? So we like to make believe, we calm ourselves, and we console ourselves with this innocence that this young girl had, and she expressed it. We try to convince ourselves that that's really the truth. And of course we should, but not without recognizing the challenges. That's what this story is, right? Miriam is the woman, the young woman, the young girl of faith. In this particular case, there were so many other Miriams that did not survive and did not succeed in their dreams. And miraculously, this one Miriam did. But we should never forget about all the other ones that suffered and died. All right. So now we're on to the next. The next, we have Sarah, Miriam. The next one is Devorah. Deborah.
The Gemara offers proof that Devorah was a prophetess. Devorah, as it is written, and Devorah a prophetess, the wife of Lapidot. The Gemara asks, what is the meaning of the wife of Lapidot? Through this expression, scripture informs that she used to make wicks for the tabernacle that stood in Shiloh.
Okay, so the verse obviously has the word prophet in there, but there's a little peculiarity to the text. When we have the Miriam verse, it says, right, Miriam vatikach Miriam hanviah, right, and Miriam the prophet or prophetess, blah 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 blah, right. Here we have a verse that says, Udvorah isha neviya eshet lapidot. Right? We have a woman who is a prophet, the woman of lapidot. Right? So the simplest idea is that she was the wife of lapidot, but then the Gemara here has a different explanation. But the point is that the word woman is mentioned twice. It could have said, and Devorah the prophet, woman of lapidot, right? So what is that all about? So the wife or the woman of lapidot ends up being a different explanation. Let's yeah. So we have the Gemara saying lapidot could mean this person lapidot. By the way, this is the source of the Jewish name Lapidus, right? And lapidot is understood in the usual reading as the name of somebody, but the word lapid means a torch, right? We have an Israeli politician named Lapid, right? And that was a Hebraized shortening of whatever their European name was. I don't know if it was Lapidus, I don't remember. But anyway, so a lapid is a torch. So here the Gemara says that she used to make wicks for the menorah that stood in the tabernacle. Okay, so what do we understand? What kind of extra information do we have about this person? She's doing women's work, right? Making little wicks, right? She's like, spinning the little threads that are then used as a wick for the light. She's a prophet, right? When we actually encounter her, and we'll get to it a little bit in the Gemara, she's Hillary Clinton, she's Nancy Pelosi. She's like a very strong, high-powered, high-profile woman. She's got a lot of people doing her bidding. She's calling the shots on a lot of stuff, right? And yet we have this image here that, what is she doing? She spends her time making sure that there are wicks for the menorah in the sanctuary. This kind of like little thing that you would imagine would be done, by the sisterhood, or by, some simple, people that have, they're not intellectually brilliant, they're not rich, they're not well connected, but they give a little wonderful little donation to the shul, right? So that's the kind of back and forth we have here. She's this prophet, but actually what she really cares about is not to be in the limelight, but to actually, contribute to creating the spiritual light that's in the tabernacle. By the way, a spiritual light, it's physical with the wicks, right? That nobody sees, right? The menorah is inside the space of the tabernacle. Only the priests see the menorah lit, right? The rest of the population doesn't see that. They never see the menorah shedding light. It's only inside the tabernacle, it says. So you have this kind of like, on the one hand, she's out there, the spotlight is on her. Really what she's doing, what she cares about is, I would really just like to make this kind of internal spiritual light happen in the place that's holy. Okay. We turn the page, we're on 14a4.
4. The Gemara dwells on the topic of Devorah, and she sat under a palm tree. Why did Devorah choose to judge Israel while sitting under a palm tree rather than under a different species?
This is one of the most difficult questions in the entire Talmudic literature, right? This is a toughie. Maimonides makes fun of these kinds of questions, right? Because if she would have sat under a cedar, what would the Gemara have asked?
Why a cedar and not another tree?
And not right. Why didn't she sit under
Not
a palm tree? Right. So it's not exactly the most bothersome question, in the world. Okay.
So why did Devorah choose to judge Israel while sitting under a palm tree rather than under a different species? Rabbi Shimon ben Avshalom said, because Devorah was careful not to transgress the prohibition against yichud. She therefore chose a palm tree whose branches are very high, so that she and others with her would be clearly visible.
Okay, so there's a compelling answer. Okay,
Argument.
so,
yes.
Right. So no, if she would have been with a pine tree, I remember when I was a kid, we had a gigantic pine tree, in the front yard of our house.
I have a gigantic one in my backyard. It's the only pine tree for what looks like miles around.
Right. So the pine tree that we had in our front, it was this conical kind of pine tree, very wide at the bottom, and the branches held, were heavy, and they sort of sunk down to the ground, and you could go and hide inside. You could hide inside, and that was fun. It was a great little space for a kid to spend some time in, right? So that's the idea that you could go in there and nobody would see you. At least you would think that nobody would see you. So that's what the rabbis here are saying. No, she wanted to be out in the open. She wanted to make sure that everybody saw that she was on the up and up, that she wasn't hiding anything, that she wasn't this is a woman man thing, that she wasn't hanging out in a compromising way, for people to starting rumors about what she was doing. Okay. Wait. Thank you, Merle. Thank you. Yes, it is. It was a nice tree. Yeah. So yeah, Bill.
Another reason. No, I was just going to continue, but
all right.
Only if we're ready. Another reason she chose to sit under a palm tree was because it symbolized the Jews of her generation. Just as this palm tree has only one heart, so too the nation of Israel in that generation had only one heart for their Father in heaven.
All right. So that's a little more homiletic idea, that palm tree was just such a beautiful symbol of the Jewish people in that way. Let's look for a second at 46.
Note 46. Regarding the question of whether a woman may serve as a judge, Tosafot assert that one may not adduce proof from the example of Devorah to support a positive response. Perhaps she was only instructing the nation in the laws of Torah, not actually adjudicating disputes. Or perhaps her case was an exception, for the people had accepted her as a judge over them since they perceived that the divine presence rested upon her.
Okay, so here we have a little a window into the discomfort of the tradition with, look, if a woman is a prophet, what are we going to do about it? God, we can't tell God what to do. But that a woman should be a judge? Oh my God. God forbid, right. Because this is a position of political power. And for the longest time in Jewish tradition, just like in the rest of the world, women could not be conceivably eligible to have power over other people, right? Their place was actually, as I said on the high holidays, in the tent. They had to be in the tent, and of course that's part of the problem with yichud, right? If they're in a closed place that's not controlled by their husband, then who knows what's going on there, right? This whole fear, this whole sexual gendered, paranoia that unfortunately was the reality for, culturally for thousands of years. So here we have a biblical example in the book of Judges that tells us that she judged the children of Israel for 40 years and brought peace to the land. So what the heck can we do with this? How can we possibly reconcile ourselves to this? So one way to reconcile ourselves to this is, oh, duh, it means that women can do everything that men can do if they have the qualifications, if they have the gifts that that the job requires. But that's an impossible answer, right? For too long, that was an impossible answer. Then the question was, so how do we get around it? How do we? So one answer, that's the two answers in our note. One answer is she wasn't really a judge. Right? She wasn't really a judge. The term is used loosely. She wasn't really a judge. It just simply means that she was like one of these women that, has, a podcast. She teaches us a little bit about the Parsha. That's okay. We could live with that. But that she should actually tell people whether they have to do something or not have to do something, be a real judge to decide whether something is legal or not legal. To have that kind of power, unthinkable. So that's the first answer. What's the second answer?
She's an exception.
But how? She
Uh,
really is a judge. She really is a judge.
Judge.
But how did that happen?
According to this note, the divine presence was on her in the perception of the people.
Yes. Thank you. So
In the
go
perception
back,
of the
go
people.
back, go back a couple of phrases. What does it say there? If the people accept her as a
Accepted her as
judge,
judge,
then she can be a
a judge.
right? So that's another kind of answer, right? That's the answer that's saying, well, if the society is ready to accept this person to be a judge, and they should have good reasons, of course, but if the society is ready to empower that person to be a judge, then of course they can be a judge, right? So it's not top down. It's not that God, appoints this person to be a judge or that person to be a judge, but it's the power to judge comes from the people. I mean, this is a fundamental political idea and a fundamental democratic idea. Right? It's not divine right. It's not some kind of royal, divinely endowed power, but it's the power of people that they then give freely to somebody to do the job for them. Okay, so that's the second answer. And of course, in modern times, let's say in very traditional communities, this becomes the possibility to start talking about this. This makes it somewhat, can you have, listen to this question, can you have a shul president who's a woman? In the Orthodox community, this is not obvious. In the Orthodox community, there are modern Orthodox synagogues that allow for a woman to be the shul president. Why? Because of this answer. If the shul membership is willing to accept a woman to be their president, then we can allow it. Right? That's the answer. But there are many, many other places in the Orthodox world that are simply no, absolutely not. This cannot be. And back in the old days, and again, the British took over Palestine, right? They after the First World War, they defeated the Ottoman Empire, and the Ottoman Empire were the rulers over the whole Syria Palestine area, and then it got chopped up in different ways. But the British had the British mandate over Palestine. So the British started instituting certain kind of political restructuring. And their question was, how do we govern the people that are there? We need to talk to representatives of each group. So there are Jews in the land of Israel and in Palestine. That's a Jewish community. It's an identifiable ethnic group. We need them to appoint representatives or to elect representatives that then we can deal with, right? The way a lot of empire, situations are. So then the question was establishing elections for a Jewish communal governing body that would then have the standing to negotiate with the British about what the interests are of the Jewish people and so on. Well, who gets to vote in these elections and who gets to run in these elections? Who can run in these elections to be a representative of the Jewish people? And who's entitled to vote for these people or not vote for these people? The same kind of questions that we thought we solved already in this country and are coming back to bite us again because there's this withholding that certain people have because they're afraid of giving power to people. So this was a huge question. And the question was, can women vote? And this is the same time, we didn't allow women to vote in this country until 100 years ago. So this is precisely the same time. In New Jersey, 1917, the right for women to vote was voted down by the state of New Jersey. As I saw in the paper somewhere, this is not such a democratic state, somebody said after Tuesday. So the question was whether women could, because this was power, this was political power, and could women stand for office? Could they become one of the representatives? And the Yishuv, the Jewish settlement, was, as it is today, very powerfully segments were very powerfully identified with Orthodoxy. And you had Rabbi Abraham Isaac HaKohen Kook, Rav Kook, who is famous and revered as the leading rabbi of Israel in that generation. He was appointed by the British to be the chief rabbi of Palestine. That's how he became the chief rabbi. Wasn't a Jewish thing; it was a British thing.
I think it was an Ottoman thing, actually.
It was an Ottoman thing.
They took it over from the Ottomans.
Right. They took this whole idea that you wanted to have communities that they could then interact with. Yes, you're right. Yes. So his opinion was, anybody want to guess? His opinion was that women could not vote.
Not vote. I'm surprised, frankly, from
right.
the
He
little
had
I know.
a reputation for being this liberal, far-sighted, welcoming modernity, welcoming secular Israeli pioneers, the Chalutzim, which he was to a great extent, but he was also a tremendously traditional rabbi and Jew, and immersed in Jewish tradition, and he couldn't see his way out of it. He could not countenance that women should be able to vote. But there was a guy in Hoboken,
yes,
who had been kicked out, had been chased out of the land of Israel by the ultra-Orthodox at the turn of the century. An older contemporary of Rav Kook, named Rav Hershenson, Rav Chaim Hershenson, my big hero. And he wrote a tshuva that said, "Are you kidding? Of course they can vote. What kind of question is this?" But nobody listened to him. And then the Sephardi chief rabbi ended up being persuaded by him. And he said, Rabbi Ben Sion Uziel, very remarkable man also, again, very much in the shadow and not given his due. But he ended up making the more well-known halachic decision that women could vote and could stand for office. And the ultra-Orthodox did not allow women. And to this day, there's not a single woman in the ultra-Orthodox parties in Israel who's a member of Knesset or a head of a committee or anything like that. But Mizrahi, the modern Orthodox Zionist group, which usually would see Rav Kook as their authority, they overruled him. they went against him, and they allowed women to be part of their party, and they allowed women, and they came out publicly saying women should participate in this political process and so on. So it's very much that second answer in the note about what are the people in the end going to countenance? Are they going to want this? Are they going to accept it? Are they going to push for it? And that's exactly what happened in modern times as well. Jen.
I remember reading recently, well, not recently, within like the past couple of years, there was an Orthodox woman who became, I think, first a New York City judge and is now a state judge. And I read an interesting article about how like she couldn't possibly be accepted on a Beit Din, but it's totally fine to be a judge of the state.
For the goyim, no, seriously, it's going to sound, for the goyim, who cares?
Yeah.
Right?
Okay. It could affect the lives of Jews also, a judge, depending.
But
But,
that's a painful, corollary of that. But at least in theory, she's judging the goyim. All right, who cares? But you're right. That's exactly
it's a rather prestigious position. Though.
It certainly is. But if they had their druthers, and that's where in Israel they have their druthers, they would never allow it, right?
Mm.
David.
Mizrahi contradicted Rav Kook. This was during Rav Kook's lifetime?
Absolutely. Yeah, this was like 1920.
Yeah.
Yep. Right for the elections.
Bnei Korach.
There you go. That's right. All right. Very good. All right. Back to here. Now we're up to our next no. Oh, yes. One more thing. So the Tamar has one heart, it says. Okay. So that I don't know if this is look at the note. I don't know if this is so correct or not, but note 47.
It's odd. Excuse me, note 47, yeah?
Yeah.
The sap of a palm tree flows only up its trunk, whereas the sap of other trees flows into the branches. That's Rashi's view. Sifrei Chochanim explains...
So what? Sifrei Chachamim.
Sifrei Chochanim.
So first of all, a palm tree has, the branches are funny, right? That's the palm tree, the branches are basically the leaves.
The leaves, yeah.
So the lulav is the palm, is the branches of the palm tree.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit different than other things. So that the sap doesn't go in there, I find that very hard to believe.
Yeah, I don't know.
So, I don't know that Rashi knew what he was talking about. Okay, in this particular case,
In this particular case, so noted, Sifrei Chachamim explains that
Siftei Chachamim.
I can't see the little letters.
The lips of the wise.
Siftei Chachamim.
Siftei Chachamim. Siftei Chachamim is a commentary on Rashi's commentary.
A hyper commentary.
Right.
A meta commentary. Okay.
Right.
Explains that the sap of a tree.
It's called a super commentary.
A what?
Super. It's called
super commentary. Okay.
It's on the commentary.
Commentary. Explains that the sap of a tree is analogous to the heart of a living creature. Just as the heart is the most important vital organ in the body, so the vitality of a tree depends on the flow of its sap. Thus, since the sap of the palm tree is confined to the trunk and does not diffuse to all the branches, as in the case with other trees, the palm tree uniquely symbolizes Israel's constant and undivided allegiance to the Almighty.
All right, so I don't know, that doesn't do much for me. What I would suggest as an alternative is that the palm tree is what can I say, bigendered, right? The palm tree is both male and female.
Uh-huh.
So so I would read it that way, that the palm tree unites within itself in one heart all of the people, because the palm tree is both this half and that half of the population.
Okay.
All right. Next. Hannah is the next one.
A proof that Hannah was a prophetess.
All right. Who is Hannah? Who is Hannah? Hannah is Samuel's mother. We had before that Elkanah is his father, and he lived in Ramatayim Tzofim. And now this is Hannah is his mother. And we read this story on Rosh Hashanah because Hannah is another barren woman who prays for a child, and finally her prayer is answered, and it's Samuel, and she makes a deal with God. She goes, if you give me a child, I'll give my child back to you. And that's what happens, right? Samuel then becomes a major prophet, and he spends his life, once he is weaned, he spends his life away from his family in the temple. It's not a temple, in the tabernacle, in the shrine. Okay, so Hannah.
Hannah, as it is written, and Hannah prayed and said, my heart rejoices in God. My horn is exalted in God. Since Hannah said, my horn is exalted, and not my flask is exalted, she prophetically implied that only through a horn will one become exalted. And so it was. Concerning David and Solomon, who when installed as king were anointed with a horn of oil, their reign was prolonged. However, concerning Saul and Jehu, who when installed as king were anointed with a flask of oil, their reign was not prolonged.
Okay, so it says Ramah Karni Bashem. This is simply a Hebrew phrase, right? That my horn has been lifted up.
Yep.
And the way that the Talmud is reading it is that the horn is lifted up to pour anointing oil, and that's how kings and priests were installed into their position of authority. That's the word anointed, right? The anointed one, the Mashiach. The Mashiach means the anointed one, the one who had oil poured over their head. But what's the container for the oil? So in the case of Saul, who was an unsuccessful monarch, guess what? He didn't have a horn that was poured the oil. It was just a little jar of oil. So that's what they're reading. True royalty would only happen when a horn of oil was born, and she knew that, so that shows that she was a prophet. Like I say, the phrase itself is a biblical phrase. We have it in Psalms. We have it in the morning Psalms. How does it go? It goes, Vayarem Keren Le'amo, Tehillah L'chol Chasidah, L'bnei Yisrael Am Krovo, Hallelujah. It's Psalm, whatever it is. It's after Ashrei. So it's one of the late 140s. 148 probably. And we have it also when we take the Torah back into the ark. Vayarem Keren Le'amo, Tehillah L'chol Chasidah, L'bnei Yisrael Am Krovo, Hallelujah, Hallelujah. That God raised up the horn for his people. So it probably is related not even so much to anointing. It has to do with just like, a powerful, like a ram, has these horns, and when it's like ready to, stand up and be, aggressive, it raises up its horn like that. But we also know that horns were a symbol of power. And remember the Vikings? Remember them? That was like you put that on your helmet, as a symbol that you were something. You were somebody to be reckoned with. And all the the opera singers and so on, right? That they have all those horned helmets because the horn was a symbol of strength and power. And don't mess with me. And that's what Hannah was saying here. Hannah was in her prayer celebrating the fact that she was rescued from being a beleaguered and disrespected person because she had no children. And her co-wife, Elkanah, had 2 wives. Her co-wife had many children, and she lorded over her, and she would torment her and say, who are you? I'm the real deal. because I have children and you have nothing. So this, of course, is just, again, one of the realities of the way society, always worked. And this was her redemption. This was the raising of her horn, right? This is the raising of her respect, the raising of her dignity, because she had the power to give life and to have a child. Okay, she's also, of course, just since we're on her situation, she is our teacher for how to pray.
Mm.
The Talmud says, how are you supposed to pray? And they say, well, let's look at Hannah. Hannah prayed and her prayer was answered, so she must have known how to pray. And the story is very ironic because she is standing in the tabernacle, and the priest, Eli, sees her praying, and the Bible says that Rak sfateha na'ot v'kola lo yishama. Her lips would move, but no one could hear her voice. Right? It's called like I try to get people, even though I have never succeeded completely with everybody in our shul, to say the Amidah in silence. And
you just were never there before you came, where it was like you had to like speed up and get it done because then all of a sudden everybody was moving on and
speed it up and speed it up silently. So what can I?
No, but we also had a lot of sidebars.
I know.
So you actually did an amazing thing. Just so you know.
I think. I mean, look, it's 99.9%. It gives me spiritual nourishment.
Me too. And when I'm in a guest shul, like if I'm at my brother's or something, it's like you get like 2 minutes if you're lucky.
Right.
It's like a much different.
Yeah, Geraldine.
When I'm in another shul, which is rare, and these days I haven't been there for several years, it's very disconcerting when people chant the Amidah and then sit down and start to talk. It drives me crazy, and I lose my trend of thought. It's very difficult.
Yeah, I think this is
and
like.
You know what's worse?
No, what's worse?
When the person who's leading the service says, please continue praying. If you're not finished, we'll go on.
I agree.
That totally moves me out of
I don't understand the thinking behind that.
Go on. Don't instruct
if you think I'm praying, why are you talking to me?
Right.
So yes, I don't get that at all. And unfortunately, it says something about the loss of a certain sense of what it means to pray.
Gosh, just on this topic, I'm so sorry, but I'll make it fast. There's a really great cartoon of a priest kneeling in his office deep in prayer, and his secretary bursts in and says, "Oh, good, you're not busy."
Excellent. Great. So anyway, but the ironic part of that story is, and it's relevant. Haley doesn't get it. The high priest doesn't know what she's doing. He doesn't know that she's praying. He thinks she's drunk.
She's drunk.
He thinks she's drunk, and she turns to him and goes, "Hello, I'm praying to God. Did you ever hear of such a thing? That's what I'm doing, high priest." So it's and the Talmud says this is what it means. This is what it means to pray. This is how we should pray. So that's Chana. And now we have one more thing, and this is a text that's a very central text to anybody that deals with Jewish aesthetics.
The Gemara digresses to expound on.
Oh wait, we're not. That's it. Sorry, I take it back.
Okay.
We will hang on till next week.
Okay.
That's it. All right.
All right.
I hope we'll have next time. We'll see each other and continue with this really, really intriguing text. Okay.
Yasha Korach. Stay safe, everybody.